And since Good Samaritan has decided to pull out of turning an abandoned school into a homeless shelter, what will happen to the old Lamar Elementary? Brian Burns tells us that the Ed Rochelle Foundation, which owns that property, says they have others who may be interested in the property.
After hearing from neighborhood residents near the school at Agnes and Laredo, the board of directors for Good Samaritan has decided for now to leave the shelter where it is. But the Rochelle Foundation says they still want to make the property something that will improve the neighborhood.
I think that there still hopefully is going to be a good use for that property. Keeping that building vacant is just not good for the community overall.
We reached Paul Altide with the Rochelle Foundation by phone. He told us there's little optimism that Good Sam's will ever come back to the project, but there are alternative uses being explored. The foundation believes the structure is valuable and hopes to transform the school into something that would be economically beneficial for the neighborhood. They've already acquired neighboring property which is being cleared and could be used for parking for a commercial use property. While the City Council still has to formally approve a grant of $50,000 from the foundation to help clean up and police the neighborhood, Assistant Chief Mark Shower says they've already started a bicycle patrol in the area.
The deal was more bike patrols. We can do knock and talks for narcotics, and enforce the laws that we have for street prostitution. That's loitering. And keep in mind, too, that part of that is picking up the guys that are out there looking for prostitutes.
Shower says some of the funds might be used for speed bumps and making dead-end streets to curb the criminal traffic that uses the neighborhood. The city would still have to approve a change of zoning if someone else were to occupy the property. Brian Burns, 3 News.